Well, downtown is changing, and we're here on Fremont Street talking to panelists who are directly involved with its revitalization. That's today on Nevada Week.
Support for Nevada Week is provided by Senator William H. Hernstat, Cashman Equipment, and additional supporting sponsors.
Just 8 years ago, locals and tourists avoided downtown Las Vegas. Come down to Fremont East today, and it's a different story. Old motels have become storefronts, chic apartments are popping up, and travelers are making a point to stop by trendy new bars. But the revitalization of downtown Las Vegas is far from over. On this special edition of Nevada Week, we're exploring the benefits and the challenges of bringing new life back into the downtown area. To discuss the recent changes plus what's still to come, we're joined at Mike's Recovery in Ferguson's downtown by Brad Jerbick, Las Vegas City Attorney. Jen Taylor, co-founder and creative strategist of Ferguson's downtown. Mark Carlson, Vice President of Operations at DTP Companies. And Ryan Doherty, founder of Corner Bar Management. Well, thank you so much for all being here. We really appreciate it. This is going to be a great discussion. And I just wanted to start, and Ryan, let's start with you just on the vision for downtown, right? It might vary by each panelist that we have on right now, but when you're looking at maybe 10 or 15 years down the line, what do you want downtown to be?
Man, well, if you're looking 10 to 15 years ago compared to now, if it has any sort of acceleration of growth like it did in the last 10 to 15 years from now, I mean, we're going to be going from Las Vegas Boulevard all the way down to Maryland Parkway, no problem, with everything, in between alive and vibrant and operational and running.
Mark, we have our own history here. Downtown Las Vegas has its own history. Fremont has its own history. How is that history then being incorporated into the design and what we're trying to develop here?
Yeah, I think for us, and both Jen and I can talk about this quite a bit. The Downtowner is a mid-century modern building of ours that we took and took a spin on it, put a 6-hole putting course in it, and it's just really neat 1950s architecture that has been brought back to life. And I think Project Enchilada has been a huge component of that with travelers and with Lucky, and as we brought those buildings back to life and breathe life back into the exterior of those, whether it's through the paint, through the just slurry coats on the driveway, music and lighting. I mean, those things just make such a huge difference to the walkability of what downtown is.
And Jen, we are directly right now in Ferguson's downtown, which is one of the revitalization things. It is complete, it's open, it's up for business now. When you look at what Fremont Street and what the downtown project and the development would like to look like built around this, what is your vision for that?
Yeah, I think we're super fortunate in a way that there's not that much that's developed as a whole in the last history of downtown Las Vegas that gives us that kind of advantage of really unique development where we are able to preserve the buildings that are here and then bring them back to life. And then for Ferguson's, really focusing on highlighting our talent that's here, shifting that whole concept, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, or it's just the Strip, there's no culture. I think that's been the most beautiful thing to watch evolve.
And you're mentioning tourists, you're mentioning residents, both residents that live in downtown and residents that live in the surrounding area. Brad, do we have a focus here? I mean, is it inclusive to all? Is that really what we're looking for downtown?
I mean, everything's inclusive to all, but this isn't for the tourists. This is for us. If they want to come and they want to play here, that's great. And they'll see a different side of Las Vegas than they would ever see on the Strip or any other place in Las Vegas. But this is for us. This is our history. This is our culture. And I think as we build downtown, we build the history, we build the community. When you build a community, then you've got something going for you. That now people care about their fellow Las Vegan. And so I really think it's much, much bigger than just a showpiece for people to come visit.
Gotcha. And we'll talk more about Project Enchilada in just a second, but I want to talk about the downtown project, Mark. Tony Hsieh put $350 million of his own private funds into this to invest about 10 years ago. What are some of the successes of that phase of development here in downtown?
Well, I think probably for me personally, watching Container Park and seeing Container Park, that really, I feel like was a big pivot point for downtown, where the past, and there was a lot of stigma behind, drugs and the just prostitution, other seedy elements of downtown, and to take and put something like that in the middle of what was happening in downtown and say, this is somewhere families can go, this is a place for children to go and play, was really, I think, a turning point in what was happening with downtown, and I think helped to create the vision of where downtown was going.
Ryan, you were very early on were collaborating with the Downtown Project to open some businesses here. How have you seen it change? What have been some of the successes you have had directly with some of your businesses here?
We're concentrating on that first block of Fremont in between 5th and 6th, and I think the biggest change, we opened up in 2012. I think those first few years we were getting 90% locals that were coming over to the bars. I mean, we felt like we really built neighborhood bars. On the Fremont Street experience right across the road, we would have people that would walk right to the very end, get to Las Vegas Boulevard, and then turn around and walk the other way. I think, starting 2013, there was like enough twinkle on that side of the street for people to cross over. There might as well have been a wall there as opposed to a bridge for a long time. I think, as it got developed, people started venturing further and further down the street, and Container Park was I agree, a big pivot. You started seeing tourists, you started seeing, the locals that you saw, and then you started seeing families. Like we affectionately call it stroller count. When stroller count is really high, we feel like it gets safer and safer down here because we see people walking around with strollers and families. But going back to Project Enchilada, which I know we're going back to, now that all the trees are there, festooning lights that are going to go all the way down from 5th Street to 10th Street. I mean, it's going to be, even more twinkle for people to come across the street and come check us out.
So that stroller count, are we seeing an increase? So we're looking at kind of a trending
every
line
year.
Every single year.
Every year it goes up.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think the one thing too, just to layer on to what Ryan said and what Brad said, just about building this for the locals, like Ryan said, getting locals here, and that Brad had mentioned that he's doing what he's doing for the locals, and I can't tell you how often I hear that people want to go check out what the Las Vegas locals do, right? And everyone's so curious about what Las Vegas folks do and where they go and what their experiences are like here. So I do think that naturally drives people and visitation to downtown. If we just focus on what the locals are looking for, then the tourist will come.
Brad, let's talk about Project Enchilada then. We just talked about Downtown Project kind of setting the stage for Project Enchilada. First off, Project Enchilada, it's inclusive to everything.
It's inclusive to everything, and that's why it's called enchilada, because it literally is the whole enchilada.
Right.
It's about 12 square miles, and so if you can get your head around this, it's US 95 to Charleston, I-15 to Eastern. We take in the Arts District, we take in the Huntridge Theater. And so the idea is, in 5 years or maybe a little bit more, this entire area gets treated. We're working on phase 1 right now. Las Vegas Boulevard, as Ryan said, down to 14th Street. Yeah. We're working on the Huntridge Theater right now. You're going to talk with Jay Dapper tomorrow. We're working already on phase 2, which is the Mayfair neighborhood between Bruce and 15th Street. We're working on East Fremont from Eastern, working back toward this.
And Brad, when you say working, what kind of things are actually being done in each one of these
different things in different areas. So what you're seeing downtown on Fremont right now is a resuscitation of all the old motels. That's pretty obvious. A restoration of all the original neon sign. Installation of additional neon signs. The idea being to make this a seamless street with no dead spots from Las Vegas Boulevard down to 14th. And then we'll build on that. On the other end, we're working back doing the same thing. At the same time, we're working on a neighborhood, trying to stabilize neighborhoods in this area, see them green up, see them spruce up, see them become desirable places for people to live. We want people to live downtown. I want to live downtown. So I think it's wonderful.
And reading through the Project Enchilada information, retail strategy is another big piece of this too, but that seems to be kind of down the way. We're looking at
actually, it's simultaneous, because you really can't start building buildings and rehabbing them without having some idea what might go in them. I'm very much aligned with the philosophy of DTP. Planning is sometimes an evil word. It's better to have collisions and have random things happen. But we've hired, as part of our consultants, are some retail specialists out of Seattle that just do urban retail, which is very tricky. It's very different than programming a mall in Summerlin. And so what we're seeing is what you've already seen with this group. Ferguson is a splendid example.
Yeah.
People that are local, opening local restaurants, local coffee shops, local owner of several of the best bars on the west end of East Fremont. It's just fantastic. I think that's, we're going to see more and more of that.
Yeah, Brad, and to that point, let's talk about downtown Ferguson's right here. And we've got a multitude of diverse types of storefronts and retail that you have here. The strategy that you're employing here in downtown Ferguson's, how is that then being shared with the larger Project Enchilada? What kind of communication are you having with the city?
I mean, we stay in contact. We have our lunches and dinners and travel and go explore other cities. I think overall, it's a pretty transparent group of individuals definitely sitting here and kind of our learnings and what's working and what's happening. There's no, I'm going to hold this on to myself and not share. I think for Ferguson's, our biggest focus has been human-to-human connections, really working with the community, working with the individuals. Before we opened, I've personally been here for 10 years and was coming downtown 10 years ago. So it's been awesome to watch the development. It's definitely been a beautiful shift and change. And even just seeing what was here 10 years ago still survived and thriving. And then spent the last 2.5 years while in development really meeting with individuals of the community and asking, what would they like to see happen? And, I was able to learn from the previous, good and bad from DTP, and then make those shifts and changes and kind of evolve and grow, which I think, you've been able to do as well.
I'm going to jump on that and say, I'll go on a limb here and say, we're not just people that work together, we're friends. We talk to each other constantly, and it's more than just this group. Mark is part of a group called the Fremont East Entertainment District, and we have meetings with them. Ryan has downtown DTLV, and his a website, and he's been very actively involved, not just the art scene, in addition to his businesses. Jen, we met a couple of years ago, and she just hit it out of the park with the Ferguson here. But that, I think, is really critical, is to have that personal relationship so that when somebody has an idea, nobody's afraid to say it out loud, and it just makes it better and better.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll add to that as well, because you can see the co-working that's going on with just the way that everything's being built now. To Brad's credit, he is very interested in keeping things vintage Las Vegas and wants to make sure that some of these tentpole items stay exactly the way they are. Jen coming in and developing this was in communication with Brad about keeping certain. I mean, we live in a town that implodes their heritage. We don't preserve it. Things aren't old here, and keeping vintage Vegas down here is one of Brad's main focuses. So you can see when she builds something like this, and she's keeping the signage up, and she's keeping the way the hotels are, you can see the co-working happening with just the development.
Right. Yeah, and to that point, Mark, let's talk more about some of the other motels that we have along here in Fremont. What are some of the plans to develop those? Are we looking at more retail space like this, or will they open more into potentially being housing or motels? Or
I think that for us, we have a focus on residential and hotel, and of course, with those things comes more retail, right? Whether that's food and beverage or apparel, that just comes along with those types of things. So I think the what happens in the future, we'll have to decide and evaluate. I think the one thing that is always top of mind with it is the amount of cost to bring some of these buildings back to life, and the infrastructure associated with these buildings. It's just not in place anymore. And so those are some big challenges and some big hurdles that we're faced with. But we're definitely focused on residential and hotel as we move forward. We see a lot of upside, and we need more mass down here to drive more traffic to these businesses.
Well, one of the neighborhoods that we talked about, Brad already talked about, is the Huntridge neighborhood. We take a trip out there, and we're going to talk to Jay Tapper about the purchase of the Huntridge Theater and what the plans are there. Take a look.
The goal is to bring this back to 1944.
Looking at the Huntridge today, it's a long way from its heyday. The last concert to grace this historic venue was the Beastie Boys on June 9th, 2004. Tickets were just $2.
I mean, you would go to school and your friends would say the Beastie Boys are playing at the Huntridge. And then you would get on your bike and you would pedal down and you would buy tickets. And it's foreign to think about that today.
As a Vegas native, Dapper feels invested in bringing that nostalgia back.
You ask 10 people, where do I go watch great live local music? And you'd probably get 10 different answers. And I'd love to see the Huntridge be the place where, everybody says there's a lot of, live, amazing local music that happens in this venue.
Aside from the historic theater, Jay sees potential for a brewery, along with multifamily homes. As a developer, he feels this neighborhood is worth investing in.
If I was 20-something years old and I was living in Vegas and I had a job and I could live at a place where there was great local music and a brewery and all of these things, I'd be like, that's the place I want to live.
Campaigns to restore the Huntridge Theater have been pursued since the venue closed in 2004, but Jay is the closest person to making it a reality. Late 2019, he entered an agreement to purchase the building for $4 million. If all goes to plan, renovations could begin later this year.
My feeling is that the aesthetic of the building will be respected. I think that we'll do a very good job of, the historians will love what we're going to propose.
Well, so we just saw the Huntridge Theater, and Ryan, maybe this is more of your side on the entertainment side, but Huntridge neighborhood and the Huntridge Theater particularly has a lot of history, but why is it so important then to the greater downtown area to make sure that that is restored and then usable as well?
Well, I think it goes back to like us preserving some of this history. But, I grew up in Boston. Old is 250 years for a building. You go to Italy and old was built by the Romans. Here, old is 1991 on the Strip. So, the fact that we're taking something that was such an important part of, Vegas back in, the old time and vintage time of Vegas when it was special and special now. But it's great that we're keeping some of these buildings and to have someone like Jay Dappa come in who's, can really get it done right. Everyone's excited to see a redevelopment of an iconic building like that.
Yep. Mark, let's talk more about the residential side of this and what we're doing with revitalization with residential areas and putting more housing in. As I understand it, one of the challenges early on with the project was that we didn't have enough residences here, and so we weren't having enough people that were living here that might have been then feeding into some of the retail and things like that. How has that philosophy changed? How has that strategy changed in the last couple of years?
Well, I would say that's partially true from our perspective. I think that as people and businesses started coming to the neighborhood, it wasn't quite a destination either. And so one of the things that when the tech fund first started and we started seeing a lot of these folks coming to town, what their feedback is that there wasn't enough amenities in downtown Las Vegas. And so I think that and the fact that there wasn't enough to make it a destination, I think that's changed today. It is much more of a destination in downtown Las Vegas. So, of course, residential is always an issue. I think if the learning lesson for us, we probably would have done more residential up front to really drive more mass and bring more people to downtown. So that's something that I think that waving a magic wand and going in the past, we would have focused more on residential from the beginning. For us, with our partnership with Wolf Companies combined in total, we have over 700 residential units in downtown. So we've really focused on how do we upgrade and make the living experiences much better for the people that are living in these buildings so that they are the type of demographic that want to live, work, and play in the neighborhood. And that's completely been our focus over the last 3 to 5 years.
And Mark, what's the goal? How many residences would like to see in the immediate downtown area?
So from a business perspective, we always have to be conscious, right? Right now, from a demand perspective and a supply side, there's not enough supply. So to definitively give a number, I think it always comes back to looking at the market and seeing what the rent rates are, what the occupancies are. But today we look at occupancies, we look at rent rates, and we say we need more. And there's no end in sight to what that's defined as. But at some point, as we move forward and we build another 200, 400, maybe we'd start to see some softness. But at this point, there is no softness.
Now, Jen, when we walk around downtown, we see retail, we see restaurants, we see coffee shops, we see bars and things like that. What I don't see are laundromats. I don't see mini markets or markets. We don't see things that you typically would see in a downtown where people are residing. Is that part of the strategy here, Brad?
Well, they're here.
Yeah.
Are they? Right down the street, there's a mini mart on the corner of I think it's 11th and Fremont. If you go over to Stewart and Maryland Parkway, there's a mini mart there. Now that's not enough for people to use right now, but it's going to grow. And one of the things that Mark was talking about when he said 700 units, and you think, well, there's 240 in F9. Where are the other 500 units? And DTP has been all over downtown, rehabbing everything from duplexes to apartment complexes. And I mean, what they have done is far more than what you just see here on Fremont Street. They have really been on top of taking advantage of every residential opportunity there is. And I'm completely confident that grocery stores are coming.
They're coming.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think it's also important that there's been a lot more like other people coming in and taking over quadruplexes or different other things around here. I think the Huntridge and Jonas Park and Rancho. And so it's just been awesome to see a lot more people looking to move downtown, like that conversation of like younger families. Like we on average have, we just opened, but like we had 105 families come through, last week. And in the morning, there's a lot of mom and kid hang out in the yard with a blanket. And so you definitely see more like that family focus. There's definitely the young, excited downtown living. And that has definitely shifted and changed in the last, I would even say, year more so. But there's just, if you just go 2 blocks that way, there's like 3 or 4 new developments happening that has nothing to do with this table right here, which is really exciting because then it adds that diversity, inclusivity, options, which is really important.
And DTP runs a learning center. It used to be an old church. The city owned it. We flipped it to DTP, and that's been open for 5 years now at least. So providing amenities to families downtown that you're not going to get out in Summerlin or other places.
Right. One of the concerns of any type of downtown revitalization project is that there could be gentrification or potentially low and moderate income families that get priced out and can't live in the community. What are we doing here? What are some of our strategies to make sure that this is an inclusive space for low and moderate income families too, Brad?
That is an absolutely excellent question, and it's the question that they should have asked in Seattle before they went after big tech companies. It's the question they should have asked in San Francisco. What a lot of people have done is gentrification got so far out of control, they literally have priced out of the market all their workforce, and the workforce now lives hours away from the city. And so that is a critical piece, I think, of the enchilada and just development in general, is we've got to be inclusive. We've got to be ahead of the curve when it comes to workforce housing, low-income housing, mixed income housing. I think that gentrification, again, it's got its advantages and sometimes it happens naturally, but if we don't pick those people up that are getting displaced or may be displaced, we haven't done our community a service at all.
Are we working with any developers here in downtown that might be able to provide affordable housing that we don't already have, Mark?
The Veterans Village is probably one of the great examples of low-income housing that we work closely with. I know we've helped them and gone down and done some things just to help support and sponsor what they're doing. But they have, how many units do they have in downtown now? Probably, they got to be 300-400.
I'm going to say it's about 300 or 400, and I think they're trying to add another couple hundred right now. Jason Trindade at the other end of the street has got Town and Country. He's got Desert Moon. He opened it up and is working with Arnold Stalk on putting literally homeless people in these places with supervision, with food, with jobs. He's paying them. And they in turn are paying a portion back in rent. So this is the kind of thing that is just, it's inspiring to see that kind of involvement by people who actually have property down here.
And for Ferguson, just to add to it, one of the things that we've been really focusing on, again, going back to like a lot of conversations with our community, is implementing different programs. Like Future Makers is a kids entrepreneur workshop program, and they do 1-for-1. So if you take a workshop, then they give one to a family or a kid that maybe can't come in. We also work a lot with Caridad, who helps the veteran homeless too. So when we do events, really focusing on the proper percentage to go back into the community. And more importantly, from like an arts perspective, a lot of times it's like the starving artist, where we're like, no, why does everyone have to be so starving? So like really figuring out like how do you appropriately like figure out your business plan and pay people, and then offer different entry points so everyone can experience what's here.
In addition, we've already mentioned this, so just some of the community events you have to bring the community and be a lot more inclusive too, Ryan. We've got things like Market in the Alley, but First Friday, of course, is huge. We're bringing big entertainment to downtown. Life is Beautiful, of course, is something that has been in downtown too. When we're looking at these events maybe in the future, how are these events going to grow? Is this a big central strategy of downtown, is to bring more people with these types of events?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll let Ryan speak more to this.
Well, I think all those events and what they do is they amplify what's already going on downtown. So we have such an accelerated growth going on in just this street alone. Forget about the rest of downtown. It feels like there's a new business opening every 6 months. When you do these big events where you're bringing people from Henderson, Summerlin, and also the feeder markets coming in from out of state, they get to see downtown sometimes for the first time, but they get to see what's new from the last time they were here, the last big event. So Life is Beautiful 2017, 18, 19, 20. So much has opened in all those years. It amplifies what's already going on downtown. A lot of people come downtown. They used to come to Vegas for a weekend and they would never leave the Strip. And now we're seeing tourists that are coming down here and spending one full night down here. There's enough to offer them for them to come down, to come downtown. So sometimes they come in for an event and they come back just because they're like, oh, downtown's so cool. We got to come back and just spend a couple days down there.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate all your time. Thank you. For resources discussed on this show, visit our website at vegaspbs.org/Nevada-Week. You can also always find us on social media at Nevada Week. Now, before we go, we want to talk with Mike Buckham, who is a resident and a business owner right here. Take a look.
This is quite magical. I would sit at Public House across the street, and envision what it would be like having a business in one of these old motels downtown.
You can probably tell from the accent, Michael hasn't always been a local.
Growing up in the UK, where things are often kind of restored and revitalized, I really kind of had that vision for what we could have down here.
But like many of us Vegas transplants, he's found a way to make the Valley home.
I've lived in downtown for almost 20 years, and to see the change of what's happening in this city is phenomenal. I love it.
Not only does he live downtown, but a second home, Mike's Recovery, is set up shop in Ferguson's, right on the corner of 11th and Fremont.
So Mike's Recovery came to be basically out of necessity. I was in a lot of physical pain and sought something that was more natural for my pain relief.
You can smell Michael's passion in the store. He makes all his blends fresh right behind the counter. He says having his downtown storefront has helped him grow, both personally and professionally.
I think locals are really excited to see something like this, where we have a community-driven space where there are actually people who are really passionate about what they do, creating something that's really good.